You know, there's kind of one thing that I really want to do with this channel and everything I do with education is to bring design to more people, to make it more accessible and easier to learn. And for a while, Figma was actually pushing in that direction, but we know what happened. Luckily, you don't really need to be stuck to just one design tool. You can still learn, you can still do it for free, and you can still become an amazing designer with other tools. And I will be exploring these apps for you this year in more detail. Today, I'm gonna be talking to Penpot CEO Pablo, and I'm gonna be asking him some questions about what Penpot is, what are the future goals, and upcoming features of the tool. So let's listen in, because this is actually a very exciting and very different approach to what Figma has done. But at the same time, it can enable even more people to learn design without boundaries. I wanted to start by congratulating you with both the recent funding round, which is a big deal because it will allow you to grow much faster, and also the huge community spike with more people registering for Penpot, because this is probably an even bigger achievement to get the actual users on board, and thousands of them. So this is really cool, and I have to say that I've been a fan very early on, mostly because I'm educating people. I'm trying to get them to, learn design, especially from emerging countries. And
Yeah.
having a tool that allows them to do it on Windows or on basically any computer that they have is liberating, because they can then find a job in the EU or in the US and basically change their lives for the better. And this is amazing. So some of my questions are a little bit related to education.
Mhm.
But I want to start with a simple question. So, if you were to tell me, like in an elevator pitch, what Penpot is, what is Penpot in terms of why should people give it a try, and what it is in like the broadest strokes?
Well, I'll go with the our vision because that's really what matters, right? The current state is A. We want to go to point B, but it's what brought us to this adventure was the need to build to create a design and prototype tool for both designers and developers to collaborate, to really seamless collaborate, like have one conversation. And doing that 100% open source and 100% open standards. Um, so if you're in a team and you're either a designer, UX, UI designer, or a front end or back end developer, and you have the need to build software as a team, and you're already enjoying this fruitful conversation, you might find that the tools themselves keep being disconnected. That flow, that conversation, that on the same page doesn't happen. So Penpot is all about the design process is going to happen with everyone on board. And for that, we need designers and developers to work within the same platform. So you should be able to not only design, but also get the code and be able to integrate Penpot with the rest of the software development pipeline. But it's very important for me that that elevator pitch includes it's open source and it's open standards, because that immediately enables two things. One is finally designers coming en masse, flocking to open source. We need designers in open source. Otherwise, it's too small of a community, even though it's a massive community. So we need designers to understand and appreciate open source, and at the same time, we need developers to appreciate and enjoy the design process and take part of it, right? So open source and open standards, I think, play a huge role. But it's in the end, it's about at the next level of collaboration between these two fundamental roles and mindsets, right?
Okay, so will it be going a little beyond the typical handoff that we have right now? So, like copy CSS, export some assets, and in what way?
Absolutely, we want to kill handoff. We want to see that as a thing of the past. Some people say, okay, now it's handshake. I don't know if it's handshake, right? What is the next term that we should embrace? I'm not sure. For me, it's just one seamless process, one conversation, no handoff. no back and forth, no double checking, no stopping and asking and stopping. Getting out of your zone. Right? Like you're designing, you are in this creative zone, you are at full speed, and suddenly you think, oh, I don't know if this metaphor, this abstraction, this way I'm composing this is going to be understood by developers. I should stop now, go pick a developer and ask them whether they understand what I'm doing, right? The same thing goes with developers. Like they start coding and suddenly they are unsure if they are aligned with the scope and the design and the interaction that was intended. So they stop and they go back and double check, and that happens so many times. And that
Yeah,
is what we
absolutely.
call the handoff mindset, or the back and forth, just braking all the time, instead of going full speed. So it's that is why we do think we go beyond the typical design and prototype tool here. I think we've seen an era of designers collaborating with other designers, enjoying that real time, async, whatever. But they've enjoyed that. What's next? Obviously, designers collaborating with developers, right? And developers collaborating with designers. So we hope to bring that new process to teams. For the individual, I think there's a lot to gain from Penpot, but where we think it really shines is when it comes to teams.
Okay, so I guess we're gonna see some of these changes to the workflow being implemented in the future.
Yeah.
And are you consulting it with like big existing teams, or is it like made a little bit on a hunch and then tested, in the live version?
That's a very cool question. So that bring us a question around how do we actually do our research and define and prioritize what we do. So the company behind Penpot is Kaleidos, and Kaleidos has deep roots in open source. Actually, Kaleidos, the company is Kaleidos Open Source. That's the name. And we had both open source designers and open source developers. So and we respected each other, and we really enjoy working together as teams, and that gives us years of experience on how to do that, how to achieve that. So we have like a nice groundings for us. Like we already have experience with how that should work, but also we are interviewing teams around the world. We are very much interested in like sending surveys, asking for feedback. We have the community space, and we are seeing a lot of people wanting to participate in that conversation. How actually does how this designer developer collaboration should look like, right? And there's a very nice example, which is brings us to Penpot's layout, or Penpot's AutoLayout, which it is upcoming, like it's in a month. And the approach is actually very much developer friendly. It's very much going to W3C standards and terminology and vocabulary, and bringing that into flex and grade, right? Concepts. Instead of sticking to how designers would think about that, we are like merging vocabulary from developers. So it's just one term that rules them all, right? One set of terms. And I think that is going to help not fall into the lost in translation issue that we have. But of course, there are many other things, workflows, interactions, features themselves, things that we will build to make sure that developers are part of the design process. And we are actually asking countries and people with different cultural backgrounds to join the conversation, because we do think that this is all about innovation, all about owning your work and owning your ideas and the solutions that you need for your own challenges. And this is not going to be fine if we just stick to the Western centric design approach.
And the closed
Um,
standards that some companies are enforcing because of the way that they operate, right?
yeah, I think it is important to not um, to be aware of your bias culturally, and when you are creating a tool that is enabling people to create other tools, right? It is a bit of it's meta, right? It's like this is why Penpot is so challenging. People kind of understand it, but I'll make it very explicit here. Penpot has two challenges. One, the technological challenges. That is massive, right? Particularly when you are all in with open standards and SVG. That is a technological challenge. But then we have the other challenge, which is how to build a design and prototype tool that does not constrain your creativity, that you actually can just think of something, imagine something, and then feel like the tool is just saying, okay, if this is what you want, this is fine. Instead of saying, well, that is not considered best practice in design,
Yeah.
or this tool, nobody actually cares about that in the Western-centric idea of what design should look like. Right? So we have to be very careful to be able to make very inclusive design and prototype tool, basically.
Well, I see it myself as I use a design tool, mainly Sketch, for a lot of work that is outside of the typical design spectrum. I use it for like all my YouTube visuals and different things that are not even oriented to design itself, because I kind of use it as just like a vector editing tool, like in the good old days of Fireworks and
Yeah.
all that awesome software that also was gobbled up by Adobe. But I want to get back to you on that sort of community contribution a little bit later. But I have one more question about auto layout, because you mentioned that your vision of auto layout will be very developer friendly in terms of like the terminology and the standard behind it. But does it mean that basically a lot of the code for a specific component designed in an auto layout system will be like already available? Like the most of the structure will be like almost coded with just a couple of tweaks, or will it be more like values that they need to import but still code it themselves, the developers?
We actually plan to have both. Sometimes you really need that since our design is code already, since we there's no translation, we go all in with SVG. I think SVG, HTML, CSS, but that's easy. I think you should go for both. The immediate code representation, um, and everything you can do on top of that, because then you can consider what is your storage layer for that. Shouldn't I be able to send that to my Git repository? And so all that you can take automatically from design being code already, I think has a lot of potential. But then also a lot of people ask us like, look, that's fine, but I really want to get like attributes and properties and values out of it. Like I don't really need the code itself. I just need some other information. So I think we should go for both. For starters, I think we'll s- go for the design is code, right?
Okay.
Um, approach. But one thing I want to mention, and I'll take any question, full disclosure here, is that you at the beginning you said you started with this congratulations uh, thing, and I really appreciate it. And I have to say you were one of the early adopters in terms of YouTube influencers that um, got what Penpot was about. The team remembers that privacy
Yeah.
that privacy video. We loved it, and that was a while ago, right? And I'm saying this because we've got a ton of congratulations like over the past few days because of this this funding round, this 8 million Series A. But it's interesting because people somehow believe that we were able to strike that deal in a week. Like it was the
Yeah.
Figma-gate We had this Figma-gate, this emotional distress in the designer community, and a lot of developers probably saying very, very politely, "I told you so." It's an issue if you live in that oligopoly, right? But actually, we got these conversations go back to February, like when really there was no Figma-gate in the horizon or
Mm.
anything the source of that. So it doesn't work like that. You don't have a Figma-gate event, which was massive, like 20 billion, massive, right? And you get a phone call and say, "Do you want 8 million?" And you say, "Yeah." You don't ask questions. You just take the money. It just doesn't work like that.
In some
Sure,
dark
I
alley
mean,
in paper bag.
exactly. I mean, perhaps very fishy business deals work like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
this
I,
is
I
this was
completely, I completely understand that, but of course, I have to mention one thing that like all my support for you guys comes from the fact that I'm primarily advocating for designers, and I kind of understood very early on that with all the cool innovations that Figma brought to the table, and with all that open sort of way of enabling people to get into design for free, I completely appreciate that because that changed the game in a big way. But I was aware that something is a little bit off with Figma. Like, why do they need such a privacy policy? Why do they have a closed format? So I was basically trying to figure out what could be next steps if well, I wasn't really initially thinking that somebody's going to buy them, but I was thinking that they might just turn like kind of evil at some point and limit everything and make it super expensive and lock people in their ecosystem. So that's why I'm very open to all the alternatives, because I
Mm,
believe the more different tools are out there, first of all, there's more competition, so Adobe Figma won't be able to charge people as much or to do some other evil stuff in the background, because they know that some people can just quit to Penpot or to Lunacy or even back to Sketch. So the
yeah.
more choices they have, the safer we are, which is pretty good. And at the same time, it's kind of like also pushing innovation forward, because obviously everybody's going to try new things. And I noticed that there are some things in Penpot, like the focus mode, that I haven't seen in any other app, which is a very cool way that you can just focus on one simple element and kind of hides the rest of the interface you're working on. And this is really cool. And also there is a lot of cool stuff in Lunacy that there's basically like something I've never seen in any other design tool. And this is really cool because that enables all that creativity and all that kind of collaborative hive mind of coming up what can we do next to push this forward. And if we just had one tool that has 99% of the market, then they could do anything they want, and like they didn't really have to innovate at all. So I'm like pushing for alternatives because my best interest, my kind of thoughts are with the designers. And I believe education is kind of opening a lot of doors for people, especially from those emerging markets. They can get a job in a better country, like better paying country, and completely transform their lives. So in a way, having an open source tool that I hope will have a free version in the
Yeah.
future as well, and some sort of self-deployable versions as well, will be able to kind of still empower these people, even if Adobe Figma completely like blocks the free plan in a 2 or 3 year period. So this is amazing, and that's why I'm rooting for you guys too.
I think I mean, Penpot is going to be open source forever, and it's going to be aligned with open standards forever. And of course, you can already self-host Penpot. You're going to have your own server. We have thousands of those deployments. Or you can go to our SaaS, which is free. We might charge for that service, in the future, um, but not like closed source or suddenly start charging for basic stuff or things like that. I think um, that is, I think, what was missing in the design space, design and prototype space. That you talk about this competition. There was some competition, but we needed um, a strong open source challenger, or actually not a challenger, but to lead this, right? Because otherwise, open source design and prototype wouldn't be guaranteed to be accessible to everyone, right? There would always be this risk that you don't own really your designs, that you have to have such level of income to be part of the club that can do this,
Yeah.
perhaps work remotely for a living, etc. So that was wrong. That was wrong. And in the open source world, in the developer world, where I belong to, for my past, 25 years, I just and in this Debian muck here, that hasn't been the case. We have had a ton of options, freedom to choose. We either had the leading option in a category or the challenger to that category, right? Databases, frameworks, machine learning, network stacks, uh, operating systems, browsers. We had like everything we wanted, except design and prototype. That was not. So I think we have to thank projects like InVision, Sketch, Figma to keep innovating. But at the same time, we are not here. Penpot didn't come here to simply clone what they did, right? To just say, okay, we have this bad copy that is always catching up, you know, with them. If we're going to do this, let's do it the open source way. Let's do it the open standards way. So that's guaranteed that is accessible to everyone. And let's do something even bigger. And so we brought the open source ethos of developer collaboration to
Mhm.
design and prototype. And that's why we are so excited to show what lies ahead. Now, of course, we had to start with something that any designer would feel comfortable with, right? Sometimes you dream big, but you have to go step by step. And 2 years ago, we decided let's go for a good designer experience first, right? Let's focus on a designer experience that is polished, that gives them what they need, so that they could migrate if they wanted. They could switch from the existing tools to that. So whenever a developer would tell their design peers, "Hey, have you seen Penpot?" The designer would try out Penpot and say, "Actually, this is very nice. I wasn't expecting this. This is very nice. I could actually switch." So the Figma-gate got that massively. Like we had that moment where a lot of designers said, "Okay, Figma is now tainted. What's next?" And the alternative that showed up was Penpot. They tried it, and since 2 years ago we thought, let's focus on a polished designer experience. They found out that it was not just a pet project by developers trying to create something not for them but for designers, but actually a designers and developers adventure, like a joint adventure, right?
Mhm.
Focusing first on designers, but next we have to take care of what developers need from such tool.
Okay, but you mentioned that you don't want to be a copy of Figma or like a contender to kind of catch up with them exactly. But then I
No, no.
have a question. Um, because there are still some features in Figma or in Sketch that designers got very, very used to. And of course, AutoLayout is one of them, even though I'm not really a fan of automatic alignment tools for a couple of reasons. But
Hmm.
a lot of people like that. But there are still some other things that basically are in those tools and they're not necessarily yet in Penpot. So do you have a list of things that you want to implement in the closer future to do that little catching up, but not like entirely copying Figma, of course, just kind of getting the functionalities that are the most important to designers?
Short answer is yes, of course. That catch up has still some work to do. Auto layout is a very obvious one. Um, Advanced components, a component system also, which is also coming next. Um, and then a ton of perhaps smaller details, smaller things that give you an overall feature parity experience, like where it matters. Figma is 10 years old now. They started in 2012.
Yeah.
We cannot just try and play catch up with them. To certain points, we go in parallel, with this very tactical idea of allowing designers to switch and say, okay, I don't have this, but I have this other stuff, so it's okay. It's a nice compromise, and that is, I think, the key idea. It's a nice compromise, but then we just depart, quickly depart.
Okay. There are also
Something,
some questions from the design system community. Some like very specific things that they would like to see. And are you considering going like very
yes,
heavily into design systems,
yes, design
like
systems
design
is
topic?
design tokens with the advanced component uh, uh, feature. We cover part of that. So design systems is key for us because we do believe that design and prototype has an issue in terms of how much it can scale up, right? And we want to make sure that you can dream big as a designer, that you can go up, just massively big, and not be bothered about the handoff of all of that, right? So it's a bit of an obsession for us to sort out the next thing in design systems. But I'll give you another very I don't know. I don't think this is trivial. I think this is important. We got a request from the community back in February, I think. February, not this year, last year when we released Alpha. So a year and a half. And was that they wanted right to left support, RTL, right?
Yeah.
For Arabic, for Hebrew, uh, Farsi, and other. There are other languages in the world, some in India that need to have the the just the freedom for them to express their UI and themselves in their language. And a month later, we shipped that. We shipped that. The and the response was phenomenal. And the thing is that that has been one of the top 5 most requested features for other tools, and they said it was too tough for them to develop. Like they would have to rewrite their entire stack to be able to cope with RTL, right? So I think that is one of the ways we are departing, right? To make sure that this is a tool that from the very beginning gets that feedback in the inclusive, arena, gets things that are important to us, even if they are not like commercially relevant for other players, right? So, and I think it's a huge win to go standards, open standards, to use the web standards, to use browser open standards, to basically try and build everything on top of the shoulders of giants, like open source always does, right? So it's a big of a tough mix, catching up and at the same time departing. What is the good balance there? We're still figuring it out, to be honest.
Right. Okay. And I have a couple of questions from the community as well, and a couple of questions that were arising during some tests. Because last May
Sure.
I was in Zurich on a design conference that actually had a Penpot exercise, which was like a usability test run by my
Right.
friend Matt. And I was a part of that actually, and
Uh-huh.
I signed up for it, especially not just to kind of give feedback, because obviously that I did, but also to see how people that never used Penpot would react to the tool. And there was one thing many people said back then,
Mm-hmm.
and it's also the same thing a lot of people say right now, which is there is one very different interface choice in the app comparing to all of the other tools, meaning the main tools are on the left side instead of on the top, like, well, basically everybody else does that. And there's still a lot of space on the top side, like a lot of empty space. So is this like a deliberate decision to stand out, or is that top space, on the top bar of the app reserved for some other tools in the future?
I think the team should answer that question, particularly probably Andy from the team. I think most people probably might not realize that this is still a beta product. Not in the sense that it's like unusable or anything or super unstable, or but that is incomplete. And what you're looking at is an incomplete canvas or picture, right? So where you see spaces, probably there's plans for that. So you are seeing like a draft thing, and it just feels like why they are not using this or that. Well, perhaps there are plans to say this other thing that we're going to develop are actually going to be nicely placed there. So
That's
for
what I
now,
was
it looks,
thinking actually.
yeah. So I'm not going to say that everything we do is super deliberate and thoughtful, and it's, we are ahead of our time. And no, I mean we have actually changed a lot of things in the user interface over these past 2 years, like things like changed the way different contextual menus appear, how you search stuff. Those of things have been moving around a bit, right? I invite people to try and find early screenshots of Penpot. Actually, when it was called UXbox, that was the code name back then. If anyone's interested, and see like it just doesn't resemble the current state. So I'd say those. I hope that we will be able to address those and make people see that okay, so here is something now that makes sense to be placed there. Um, so yeah, but I'm super excited to see usability tests on Penpot. I mean, that's super exciting. I would love to know more about that exercise,
Okay,
really.
well, probably because the problem was that it got recorded, but there was some issue with the camera, and I think that
Oh,
he actually wrote down the feedback, and I think he delivered it to you guys in some way, but I'm not completely sure.
oh, probably. Okay. Oh, then we might already have it
But like the
on the.
general reception of the people in the room was positive. But as I said, this one little detail with the interface itself, because the reason why Figma was so easy for people to switch to from Sketch, is that it actually really is a very similar type of interface. Like there is the layer palette on the left, and there is the inspector and toolbars on the right, and there is this toolbar on the top. And this kind of lowers the barrier of entry to a lot of people, that even though the icons look different and there might be some extra tools in the toolbar, they kind of know where to look for them. So this is one thing that for me and for like a lot of people was a big question. Of course you can get used to it because it's not really a problem. It's just kind of like this sort of first impression moment where you are thinking that something should be here and then it's somewhere else, and it kind of creates a little bit of confusion. But then once the people started using the app and doing something in it, they were pretty surprised that like a unknown product for them can actually do a lot of very similar stuff to the like almighty and powerful Figma. So that general impression is positive, but I think there are some little let's say maybe not issues, but some little differences that might make it a little bit more difficult for people to get into it right away. But I guess these issues can, like, if a lot of people report them, then you might consider changes in that area.
We have to have the freedom to pursue our own idea of what UI for Penpot should be. It's interesting because if we were to just mimic Figma's or Sketch, we would be accused of just plagiarism, right? So we would get easier onboarding, perhaps, but then a lot of hate, probably for the right reasons, like just copying what others did.
Well, actually, Figma got a lot of little hate at the beginning for basically copying Sketch, and then
Yeah,
some.
but look, Michal, now everyone doesn't forgot about that, and everyone thinks Figma actually created a user interface that is the industry standard, and everyone is copying Figma. So it's like, come on, we always build on top of what came
Yeah,
before us, right?
yeah, like Sketch
Uh,
based very heavily on presentation software like Keynote and PowerPoint, and then before that,
exactly,
Fireworks and Inkscape and like a lot of different tools out there.
exactly, and designers. should know better. I mean, they know that that happens, that you have this, and then you innovate a bit on top of that, and then you might become the new industry standard. And then someone else comes in and say, "Oh, I'll take this 80%, but I add my 20%." So I think we have our 20%. It's just that it's too early for you to picture it. But we have anonymous metrics in terms of how people use the tool, like that they go there and they start using, and we have like events linked to specific user actions, because we are, like really afraid that we have a new feature and nobody knows it's there, right? It's just hidden somehow. We were wrong about placing it this or there. So we have events tied to specific actions that reveal for us that the user got it. Like, okay, so they are now in this. This is an activation, a real user activation in terms of onboarding. And to be honest, that happens a lot. We thought, so as long as you give Penpot really a try, so if you do give it a try, it works. It just naturally flows. You got that initial moment of friction, but since the UI is consistent and coherent, if you're willing to switch or you are fine just trying out, it's going to work in the end. There's nothing there that you should be concerned about. So go back or to the other tool. But still, we're comparing a 6-year-old, 8-year-old tool to a 2-year-old tool. And I'm not saying it's unfair to compare them, but you had to have that context in mind when you look at both UIs.
Yeah,
But we'll
obviously,
see.
for me, it's a little bit easier because I started in '98, so I've seen like a lot of different design tools. But there are people who started when Figma was already pretty prominent. So for them, they don't even know what Macromedia is and what Adobe did to them.
Oh
Um,
yeah, oh yeah. And it's
so
actually even more challenging for us because we do have or do want developers using Penpot. So developers don't have that long history of understanding design and prototype tools. Like they are unwelcome users. Like they are, okay, I have to use this. I'll stay here as little as possible, take whatever I need, and just go back to my other tooling with I'm super comfortable with. But we don't want that. We want them to actually enjoy and have their developer experience within Penpot. So what that means in terms of the UI is also that is going to be a big step forward in innovation. I think that is when a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, wow! How did you manage to get both a designer and a developer using the same UI, but using it to their own needs, right?" So that's that. Let's people watching this video, that is a challenge for the UI too.
yeah, obviously, but luckily you now have a lot of users that you can start asking questions and kind of
Yeah,
figure this out better. Okay, I have a couple more questions. I don't want to take
sure,
too much of your time.
that's
So
fine.
one
No
question
worries.
that was also very popular is that Figma created this whole community element of it, which
Hmm.
allows you to add your Figma files or Figma projects or Figma elements to the community, and then allows other people to reuse them, contribute to them. And this kind of is a little bit following the general premise of open source, even though it's actually created in a non-open source way. So are
Yeah.
you planning on something like this as well, but on a big scale, so people could create component libraries and quickly import them between projects and share things and comment on them and basically collaborate together on like a massive scale, not within just a team?
Actually, we already did that. It's just in a very early stage, but we have these libraries and templates and libraries section on Penpot's website, where you can see how the community has already been contributing with UI kits, design systems, uh, templates, whatever. They just put them there. Um, what we have done, what we're actually doing now, and it'll be ready. I don't know. It could be ready in 2 weeks. It could actually come earlier than the official launch, like the exiting beta, right? The official launch is that um, all that is going to be part of the Penpot user interface. Like you're going to be able to very quickly browse through the community content that they have contributed, and just one click import that into your Penpot workspace, right?
That is awesome.
So and then if you're interested in who actually built that, you could contact that person, ask to be part of the team, go there, do that, and at some point perhaps create a new version and send it over to us, and we just update that, and it just keeps going. So this is this new onboard. We have a new onboarding system coming up, which allows you to understand the user interface much better, like how to navigate, and some key features so that you can start working right away. But also this within the Penpot's workspace, not the canvas, right? But where you have all the projects lined up and your teams and all that, outside the creativity zone, you will have access to all that community contribute, and also ours, right? The official UI kits or templates or whatever. So we are hoping to have an open source based community around that. I think Figma did a great job. Of course, they call that marketplace because that's how they think. Um, but yeah, I think that is super cool, and that needs to happen. Otherwise, a lot of people are not going to be able to contribute with anything else than code, right? So you want design and prototypes to be part of what you can contribute to the broader community, and this is where this ecosystem plays a huge role. So yeah, expect that. That's already happening. What I'm saying is that, but expect that and the net 2.0 on that in 2 or 3 weeks, or perhaps you need to wait for the general availability launch. But still, that means a month and a half. So it's
That's
really
perfect.
it's almost here.
Okay, we'll do a review when that launches as well. And I have a question that basically kind of comes from me now, and it's actually pretty interesting because next to all the stuff that I do on YouTube and on my own platforms, I used to teach at a university, teach design, and they were using Figma because you could basically run it on every possible computer. So my
Yeah.
question here is. You're trying to cater to teams of designers and developers, which is, well, obvious because this is like the most standard collaboration type. But
Mm.
what about designers and universities or educators? Because let's say a university would install their own Penpot instance and then write some additional plugins that would make the experience suited for classes, for example, and then basically start teaching people design in a way that is well, all in one place, like a good feedbacking system, maybe a tie-in with some other tools, especially if they're teaching remotely, like some conferencing tools to be able to do design reviews and things like that. So are you planning like a little bit of a push towards that, or is it like a maybe far off future?
The short answer would be Penpot won't ever really take off, if universities and design schools don't switch to Penpot, right? So it's impossible for a tool with such ambition to enjoy any traction, any footprint, relevant footprint, if the places where people learn about this stuff keep using all the tools. I mean, you can hack into that somehow, and you will always have some rebels, in that educational ecosystem. But people will always try to stay loyal to what they've learned, the tooling and all that, despite the fact that all people say, this is not about the tool, this is about the process, this is about the technique." Obviously, this is all true, but also when you're applying for a job and they say, what are tools that you would pick? Like, you're the first designer here, so you pick one. You probably are going to go with the one that you know already, right?
Yeah, the one from the course or from the class.
Correct. So um, we are already seeing universities and design schools using Penpot, like picking Penpot in their short list and allowing students to freely use Penpot, like for their work assignments, class assignments. But more and more, like you having Penpot as the only tool, okay, because that also allows universities are design schools too, but particularly universities have this ethos about knowledge and shared knowledge, even though in a way in many countries they are elite. Not so much in other countries, depending on the country, right? What is a university role in society might change, but in general, they still embrace these Renaissance idea that there should be knowledge being delivered to the population, right? And I think in that sense, open source and open standards are fine, are actually more than fine for them. But we need to make sure that they have an amazing learning experience through Penpot. And we don't really know exactly what that means. We do hope that people in those areas will hack into Penpot, create plugins, perhaps link Penpot to video conferencing tools, or um, like autopilot mode in the sense that you can see what's going on, like real-time collaboration, but actually it's the teacher that's doing everything, and you can see, but you cannot touch, right? If you're students, or special modes of collaboration that allow for better teaching and learning. Um, but going back to how it started, answering this question, it has to happen. I mean, it's just otherwise we come too late to people. Um, if we consider education world to be not interesting, like just wait, that would be so wrong. But at the same time, I think who has to say what that means is actually the educational system or world. They know what they need, right?
Yeah, so are you planning like sort of let's say an offer push towards universities, like maybe a landing page that explains to them um, how they can push this further? Because obviously they can get it right now, they can install their own instance and kind of start using it, but maybe it would be a good idea to inform them a little bit more about what else can they do to make that experience very much theirs, not kind of like with Figma, let's pre-install something somebody made and kind of use it as is, but instead basically make it fit the educational purpose of that particular school and the way that they're teaching. Because I noticed that the thing that you mentioned, which is that junior designers, learning in their first days how to move those rectangles around, once they do it in a tool that they have to learn for the class, obviously they don't want to try other tools because they already know this one, they're comfortable somewhat in it. So this kind of creates this huge push also in companies that they join to, as you mentioned, but in like everywhere else, that this is like this sort of one only way to learn and to design. So definitely education is an important part, and I'm kind of rooting for you guys, especially in that area, because this is kind of my area.
Yeah.
But I've seen it firsthand with like real world classes. So like 24 computers in a room and people kind of, all in Figma doing some stuff, and me walking behind them and kind of pointing something out. That can be pushed like a lot further with dedicated things created for education, which is awesome, which is basically something that no other tool can currently do, because they're focused on designers and maybe in like a small way on developers, but they're not really focused on the sort of the next level. Like they say, the next billion users will be on the internet soon, and I
Uh-huh.
think that we'll also have to see the next million designers basically eventually, because if we have a billion users, we need a lot of new designs for them. So pushing, education and pushing new people onto the tool, I think is like a very, very important thing. So I'm glad to hear that you're considering it and you're already invested in that part. And I hope this will proceed in sort of a good way and very good in adoption, sort of sense, especially since, Adobe acquiring Figma can actually in a few years make it more difficult for education, especially non-university ones, like all the internet educators that have thousands of students. They could install their own instance and do teaching that way. And of course, educational plans from big companies, from big tools, usually kind of only focus on universities, because you need some sort of certificate that yes, you're a certified educator. And if you don't have that certificate, then you're not an educator, so you can't use any of those features. You can't get a free instance of it and kind of start teaching people. So enabling on multiple levels, like both the universities and also all of this little people, little educators doing like tutorials or doing short courses and things like that, so they can kind of push people who can't afford universities, for example, people who don't have universities in anywhere near them, because there's still a lot of people. And this is like what I think is the sort of most important thing about this whole design tool revolution, that more people can do it, more people can change their lives, but we need to kind of focus on those educational things in a big way. So it's really good to hear that.
Well, I think we have to be very humble here, and what we'll do is definitely have some perhaps some landing page explaining to design schools, universities, or any place that is um, teaching design, right? How they can benefit from Penpot. What are the benefits from them for them? And make it super simple for them to self-deploy or use our SaaS or whatever. Um, but at the same time, we should just listen to what they need, and also, to be honest, encourage that massive energy that comes from teachers and students to see what they build, because they could build something. They don't have to wait for us. I think people sometimes underestimate or just think open source is just a matter of something being super cheap as free, right? But no, the fact that you can actually build on top of that your way, your use case. Like we had a recent example, we were having this discussion about offline mode, desktop app, and that also that type of use case, and we're trying to figure out what does a offline mode really means, right? For a browser experience. Is it that you're on a plane and you don't have internet and you want to keep designing? And do you want to just store all those transactions and wait till you have connection again, and then those are like pushed to the server? Or is it a desktop app experience, which is a different thing? And we got this community member, Corpse, and he just developed a wrapper around Penpot and deployed that as a desktop app for all major operating systems. And then you can now use it on Microsoft Store or Ubuntu Store or on Mac. And he got the energy, the motivation, and the energy to say, this is what I mean by a desktop app or an offline mode. To have Penpot deployed for me individually here on my operating system and have a desktop-like experience instead of a browser experience, right?
Okay, because
Because
with Figma there was also this big fiasco a couple of months ago where their servers stopped working for like a day and a
oh,
half.
we saw that. We saw that.
So,
Uh,
do you mean that your desktop experience would allow people to still continue working if they don't have their own self-deployed instance and relied on your servers?
with Penpot, you could do three things basically now. You could just trust that we have proper cloud infrastructure and just go SaaS, and hoping that we won't have that issue ever, right? An uptime of 99.59s. And second, you could just say, I don't need SaaS, or I don't like the cloud. I'll have on-premise as a service. So I'll just have my own server deployed on my own cloud infrastructure, like, that I own. And then you depend on that infrastructure, right? You depend on that other vendor. That's fine. You could actually go and say, no, actually, you know what? I'm going to self-deploy it in my laptop, in my PC. The server is my desktop, right? And I just open a browser and just type localhost. That's it. I have Penpot here, right? Um, or you could actually go that bonus option like Corpse did, which is you don't. actually deploy a server. You don't install a server and then use a browser. You actually install an exe, an an exe file, and it's all encapsulated in one window. Now the server and the client is just one piece of software, and it's transparent to you that it's actually decoupled, that you're actually wrapping that. So you own your continuity of the service as much as you can with Penpot.
Yeah,
Um,
that is important because I remember that back then people were searching for Figma alternatives even before the Adobe thing. So that was just like one day that kind of showed them that relying on just one company cloud service for everything and storing their work can be a little bit dangerous. We got used to, the world running perfectly, especially in all the cloud systems, because it has been running very well for many years. But then something like this happens and kind of disrupts the whole perception of people.
Yeah, but if I can be candid here. Of course, that is the proprietary SaaS option is a obvious single point of failure, right? So for many reasons, not only the infrastructure is that in general, that's a single point of failure you're betting on. Good luck with that, right? When we saw that 2 months ago, um, we thought, okay, a lot of people are going to open their eyes and see that they were um, betting on single point of failure. And we were going to see a surge in signups. But it's amazing how much people can tolerate that pain when there's this vendor locking. It's like, okay, this is bad. I'll go to Twitterverse and rant a bit, but the next day they would continue to work, with the same tools. We didn't see any significant change in our trends. We're already growing, but you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
perhaps it was a moment of truth for some people that, well, wait a minute, this is too critical for me to depend on this, right? But the Adobe acquisition, that was something dramatically different. The service did not stop. Figma was available. There was not an issue in terms of continuity of any service. And yet there was a disconnect in people's mind, like a sudden realization that even though they could keep using Figma, they didn't want to use Figma, right? And that is what actually made us see that uptick, which still goes on and on and on. It doesn't stop. So I would always, I mean, I would agree with you that autonomy, that sovereignty around that is massively important for a lot of people. But a lot of people out there have been okay with those pains every now and then. And it's only other more deep situations and news that have made them rethink their their choices they made, right? It's lessons learned for us, it wasn't an infrastructure issue that got us the uptick. It was $20 billion,
Yeah.
uh, and Adobe being such a, and I've seen this as a toxic brand for the designers. Andy told me that Thursday. I think people dreamed this idea that Figma would eventually acquire Adobe. That it was there would be
Probably.
the ultimate vendetta, right? That it was so big, Figma was so big. This perhaps was a childish dream, but it was the this is going to happen, and we are going to have such a party, and the opposite happened. So I can imagine that frustration.
Yeah,
I
but
think it's
obviously
important.
people in like the sort of UI design industry kind of don't really see that there is a huge amount of industries that Adobe caters to, like movie producers, special effects, advertising, print. So there's like a lot of these industries, and they're combined. They're much bigger than what we're doing
Yeah,
with
yeah. I think that
UI.
people just, yeah, very narrow window. It's of course, if you have told me that a year ago, I say people don't understand the relative size. really that's there. But if we were to prevent any of this to happen to us again in the future, the only real alternative is not have another Figma that comes up that is suddenly cool again, right? It has to be open source and open standards. That's the only real change, uh, to make sure that you, as a designer, know that you own your design, really deeply own your design. You're not renting, you know, like a
And
house.
that is also actually a very great segue to my next and final question.
All right.
Because there was a lot of talk about Figma's closed format, and a lot of people didn't really know about it. And of course, there are tools that kind of reverse engineer that and are being able to import Figma files or export them to other formats. But it
Mm,
heavily relies on their servers still. So
yeah.
basically, at some point, Adobe can completely block that export, like they've done with PS for years, and people don't really remember that. That I was super happy that some other app hacked the PSD format back like many years ago and was able to open it with some little errors. So my question is this: obviously, you're using open formats, you're using SVG a lot, but are you planning to also allow export to, for example, the Sketch format, which is an open format too? It's proprietary, but it's open. So basically, if people want that freedom to switch that Figma doesn't really give them, are you planning to basically allow them to export? And once you get the Figma import that I've heard you're working on, are you planning a .fig export or .sketch export just to kind of show that you're really for that openness of formats?
Huh. That's an interesting last question. Like, you left a big one, for the end, I think. Um, Look, I have to say it's very different to have an open format and an open standard, right? It's not the same. Even Sketch has an open format. They say this is our own custom format, but there is this description and all that to it. So you don't need to reverse engineer it, right?
Yeah.
But it's their format, and they could change it any time and just change it and change it. It will be still open, you know, but it's their format. And I think everyone that has developed, a piece of software that had to communicate with other pieces of software of the network, or within internal processes, have this ambition to create their own formats, like their own, abstraction and encapsulation of information, to be like super optimized. But that's great for pet projects. But really, when you have the challenge to become universally accessible, you have to go for open standards, industry open standards that reach consensus across the world and are really like fundamentally accessible to anyone, right? So Penpot goes that route, open standards. That means SVG for the vectors, and then our own open format, which is the JSON file that explains the whole logic around that. So you can export a Penpot file, and you have embedded. It's basically a a binary optimized zip file that has the SVGs and the JSON. Or you can just go and take the SVG and the JSON file separately. So going back to your question, um, we we want people to just forget about all the formats, but we will of course encourage the community to reverse engineer whatever they need and allow us to have this export to Figma file. We don't have that as a priority, because our priority is anything you do on Penpot is standard and you can take it to any place. If that other place accepts open standards, you should be fine. You should not need to have proprietary formats as an export option from us. But that is great in terms of community plugins. Like, if there's people with that motivation and energy, and handles us that and promises that they're going to keep up with any new reverse engineering work on top of whatever Figma or Adobe decides to do, then we'll say, okay, but you have to maintain this up to date. And this is reverse engineering, black box thing, which is not a priority for us. Our priority is to try and make open standards the new standard in the industry instead of keep going to closed formats or open formats. Let's stick to open standards, please, for once. It's not that tough. Why people sometimes want to create their own stuff? That is again a single point of failure. That's an issue, and designers know well the PSD. And of course, people are concerned that Adobe will um, block Figma's ability to export. Like the plugins that are exporting stuff from Figma suddenly will be cut off. So we are going super fast in Penpot to make sure that at least you can import it in Penpot. Penpot has the ability to import all that stuff, and we are asking for help from the community to, as soon as possible, get that export from Figma as a Figma plugin. It cannot be any other way, um, because we are in fear that we have like, I don't know, weeks to do that, right? Hopefully that won't be the case, and Figma won't make that mistake to fundamentally close their platform. But just in the event that that might happen in 3 months, we need to move fast so people can, for some time,
Backup.
bring back up everything and know that in the event of a catastrophe, they can re-import that on Penpot and, whew, now I know I own my design, right? Here I'm safe. Worst case scenario, this is open standards. I can self-host. This is formats that I can trust, etc., etc.
Yeah, because over the years, there's been this paradigm shift. That's why this is more important now than with the PSD format, because back then we didn't have cloud everywhere with Photoshop. So you had to have some sort of a file to share. And obviously, if you have a file, you can try to reverse engineer it easily. But then if you have everything in the cloud, they could completely turn off any file export because you can always share the cloud file, right, with everybody. So you don't need to send files to anybody else now. So if they block then you don't have a format to reverse engineer. You'll have to hack into their kind of cloud infrastructure, and that's gonna
Yeah,
be
it's
next to
like
impossible.
you would need to know how the database works, like because there would not be anything remotely similar to a file. What they're doing now is they're sort of serializing whatever abstractions they have into something that looks like a file, right? Or you can try and do that. Um, but Penpot, there's no disconnect, of course, we have the database, but it's just one click away from being a file, from being SVG to uh, serializing that into the persistence layer and being basically one-to-one. And that's why we're excited to see how people take that advantage that the design actually, if you go to the other side, it's actually a file that you can integrate with any Git repository or any other tool and not need to hack into the database model. Just take the file. That is the code is the design is the code. But of course, some people would say, I want to create this plugin that actually takes this and that and moves it around, and I don't need the file representation. But Penpot does have that immediate file representation experience. So it is a priority for us to make sure people can migrate from closed formats to open standards. But the other way around, facilitating that you can go from open standards to closed formats, it wouldn't be a priority for the core team,
All
right?
right.
It
So it's
would be,
probably better if, for example, Sketch creates an import from Penpot.
I would rather like to see that if they're interested in doing that. Then we would help them like do that.
Because obviously
But
that there is this confusion among designers about the closed format, open format, and open standards, because
yes,
they kind of don't really understand that. Okay, back then open standards weren't that popular, but the reason that Sketch created an open format was a big reason for Figma's dominance, because they could very quickly migrate everything from Sketch to Figma and kind of, resume their work. So right now there is this big disconnect with people not understanding that yes, they are on Figma, they're happy for now, but they don't really know what's going to happen in the future, and they have no idea that it's really difficult to get their designs out of Figma.
I hope, my personal hope here is that a lot of designers are already understanding what's at stake. Some designers will never get it. That's fine. But there's this gray area of designers that just need a little push, right? To say, oh, okay, all right, that was open standards, open format, closed, okay. And I think for that, and that's massive. Probably it's a Gaussian curve there. I think the help from developers is going to be critical here. Like developers sort of very, very softly and politely saying, I'll tell you why this is important now that we are part of your design process, right? I'll give you arguments, like I'll give you important points why this is important for me now that I'm welcome into the design process, but also why this is important for you. And I hope that a lot of designers will slowly, but gradually understand that it's better to be in the open standards world. Um, and of course, we need to make sure that they are comfortable with that. There's no compromise. There's nothing like they cannot do. That's like, oh, how I have open standards, but my life is now pain, right? That we must ensure, and that is one of our technological challenges at Penpot, that doesn't happen. That you can have the best of both worlds. That you don't have to choose between open standards and a great professional, looking design tool. And there was this on Hacker News the other day, a new, covering the Series A round. There was a Figma employee, uh, a very very nice person, saying, "I'm not speaking on behalf of Figma, so this is my personal opinion. Penpot's superpower is the SVG, right? That is their superpower, but they also need that the browsers to be uh, good at SVG rendering. Like they depend on browsers because they're going open standards. They depend on browsers embracing open standards in a performant way. And that he's or he or she, I don't know, they they are absolutely true and right about this. So browsers will play a big role in how that compromise is sorted out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Browsers, the major browsers do have to give us the best performance in terms of SVG representation and rendering.
All right. Yeah. Well, that is all great. So the sort of thing that I wanted to close with is that obviously we have a growing community of designers around us, not around just my channel and my things, but like all around us with other educators. So if they wanted to contribute in terms of feedback and bug reports and things like that, is there like a specific link that they could go to and do that for you?
Yeah, I'll share this with you. There are two main places. I think I'll start. The easiest is you go to penpot.app and there is a link that is help. You click there and there's one section that how to contribute. So you go there and there's this all the different options because people contribute with code, ideas, feature requests, content, design, templates, whatever, right? So there are many ways. Translations, we're now I think 25 languages, translated to 25 languages. So there's all sort of things that you can do. Where the conversation happens or is happening is our community space. So they can already go directly to community.penpot.app, register there, and there's a few categories that match the need that you were referring to. One is that how can I help or something like that. Like I want to help, and you go there and you basically help us by sharing your needs, your motivations, whatever you did. But also, I would encourage people to go to the category called Inside Penpot, because Inside Penpot gives you sneak peeks, regular sneak peeks on what the team is doing. And so you can go there first and say, okay, so they're already working on this. Then you don't need to ask for that. You can just join the conversation and give feedback on ongoing work. So those two inside Penpot, which is very the very own team's ideas and creativity there, and also help us or help Penpot. I think the two places I would go if I were to register on community.penpot.app.
Okay, that is perfect, and I hope more people will contribute because obviously the larger user base you have, the more potential feedback you can incorporate, and then start to see,
Yeah,
big scale patterns of what people actually need from the tool, and this is going to be essential for growth. That was quite eye opening for me as well, and
all right.
yeah, as I said, I'm gonna be trying to help here, just kind of because I see that when Figma opened the door for people, now they're kind of closing it a little bit. So I just want more people to learn because like my that's my primary goal. More
Yeah,
people, especially from places where life can be challenging. It's
yeah,
just like
yeah.
really my main motivation. Seeing people from Africa just kind of get their design skills to a level where they completely turn their lives around, work for a US based company, earn a lot of money and kind of give back to the community there. And just that growth itself is just mind blowing.
Personally, for me, Africa is the place to go. We had started the conversations with designers in Africa, incubators, different countries. Africa is huge; it's a huge continent,
Yeah.
So people from Senegal to Nigeria, Kenya, of course, Algeria, South Africa, um, many different countries, Egypt, and many different contexts. The Francophone, the Anglophone. Um, uh, so that that continent uh, really needs not only to use something like Penpot, but actually to shape what Penpot is. And so for that, we started like more than a year ago, actually, having these conversations with designers there, UX, UI designers, to understand why they use what they use and what is wrong with that, and how they would see Penpot being useful for them. And it's like we need you to answer those questions. We cannot answer those questions for you, right? And I think I want to focus particularly on Africa because um, it would really be sad to continue on this neo-colonial um, digital, digital neo-colonialism, right? Like the tool, everything a country that uses to foster innovation is actually shaped and conceived with other priorities in mind, right? If you know what I
Yeah.
mean. So we ask them, do you feel like the tool that you're using, in particular the design and prototype tools that you're using, constrain you in an inadvertently way to find your own solutions? And the answer was striking. They said, you know what? We didn't even have the chance to ask ourselves that question. We just used those tools, right? But now that you ask that, we'll start doing some introspection on how we are just getting what is given to us, and using it with those external paradigms that might not apply to specific needs, perhaps to bigger needs or global needs or whatever they are valid. But what a good design, a good user interface, a good interaction for product, for software development is, we might have a say, right, in the platform itself. So Africa in particular, since we are in Europe, right? You and I are both in Europe, right? It is actually the continent that we should mostly focus on because as a Spaniard, I do have the Western Europe um, mindset. So I do have the North American mindset easily, just because it's so overwhelming. But then we have the Latin American context closely to us because just also for the wrong reasons. But we shared language and we share some cultural traits. But Africa, not so much. Africa, not so much.
Yeah, that is,
And
and I see huge potential there as well. I'm talking to a lot of people, mostly from Nigeria, because this is the
yeah,
country that's like the most active there and huge in terms of like the number of designers there. And also, there's some first unicorn companies coming from there, which is also exciting and really good to see. So my strong focus will be on some African countries first, and then we'll try to expand with the education there as well, but in context of not kind of pushing our ways onto them, but instead maybe kind of learning from each other a little bit and kind of
yes,
putting it
yes,
together, because I also do have a little bit of that sort of American culture in me because I lived in the States for a while, but I
sure.
also have a little bit of like that post-Soviet era, because I also remember times before, before capitalism in Poland, where we had to wait in lines for bread, and getting an orange for Christmas in a package from a friend abroad was like a huge deal. So everybody brings something to the table, and it's really important to listen to all the voices and to kind of grasp that, and kind of push the, not just the industry, because that's just one thing, but humanity as well, because a lot of the stuff people do with designs or with design tools don't really necessarily just impact some software. They can impact lives very directly, and I've been seeing that all over the world, which is really an amazing thing.
I'll give you one example and then ask you a favor, if that's okay. One example that I mean, here are we, there's two white um, European guys talking about this, right? So, but when we asked about this, the feedback we got from some designers in Africa was, look, the feedback loop for stakeholders, it's kind of messy. First, we might have issues with the internet, right? So we might not have the best experience with cloud software and all that. So depending on where you are, that could be an issue. But also, they said a lot of times we have non-digital stakeholders that really have a say on a project. Like they have a lot of power, not much time, not much interest in understanding the tool that you're using, the design tool, but they have a lot of power. They can basically veto a project or just shut it down. And what ends up happening a lot of the times, they told us, is that we spend much more time explaining them how to use the tool, like in this case, Figma, rather than to explain the project that we are trying, to sell to these people. Perhaps they have the funds, and we need to explain why the project deserved those funds. So it's like highly bureaucratic process, or where you depend so much on someone unfamiliar with a design tool for the project to even kick off, right? And so they basically said we need some other way to get that feedback, to get that stakeholder experience within the design tool. So that is something interesting because they said most of the times the meeting would end up, I don't understand this tool. I'm out, right? And then although your hard work doesn't stand a chance, right? So that was just some anecdotes that we got. And the favor I would ask you is that we, since Africa is such a huge continent, such diverse continent, any help that we can get from people like you, facilitating, their conversations and their leadership in this, is going to make a huge difference to us. So let's have a separate thread, a very separate thread on Africa per se, with you and other people that you know. I have many names, many contact people that would love to have some way of working together and providing Penpot with some really interesting requests, right, coming from a deeply, thoughtful process. So if you already have contacts, interests, hubs there that really, Michal, let's talk about that
Right,
because
yeah,
it is,
I actually do, and they're pretty big, especially the ones in Nigeria, because they can often have like 20,000 people in one hub, and they're super active. And I'm also very excited to kind of work with these people there to try to contribute, but also to kind of learn from them as well. So I will be doing a little bit of an educational push for Africa. That's kind of let's say not as materialistic as like the traditional education right now, but still has to make sense financially. So I'm working on something like that right now. But definitely the tools are a big part of the process as well. So getting people there familiar with the tools and also familiar with the fact that they can contribute to those tools. They can shape the tools a little bit themselves. Yeah, it's an important thing. It's kind of like the whole premise of this design thing, that we are using a tool to design, but then we can also use our design mindset to kind of help design the tool. So
yeah,
to shape, kind of like if you're a carpenter and you don't really like the angle of some like hammer, you can use some other tool to kind of, trim it a little bit, and then you'll be able to hold it better and then work better. So I'm definitely all for that. And definitely there is a lot of conversation hopefully going on, and I hope to really push, especially Africa, because a lot of the other like emerging markets are doing quite well right now, especially like the big ones. India is has come from, basically considered, like, it used to be considered like low quality design work, low quality development work 10 years ago, and
yeah.
kind of laughable, like you go to India because you want something cheap. Right now they have amazing designers, amazing developers. They have grown in a huge way, so they don't really need as much kind of attention because they're doing perfectly well on their own. And then people kind of tend to forget about Africa. They can forget that there is thousands of awesome designers in Nigeria, for example, and looking for designers, to employ at your company, let's say, they don't even consider that. They don't think like, oh, maybe let's look there because there is a huge talent pool there. No, let's just get the sort of safe and easy route and get somebody from Eastern Europe, because they're still going to be cheaper than if you go with like British or German designers, and then call it a day. So there's definitely a lot of conversation, and definitely I want to push this forward. Yes.
That is amazing, and truly, the whole team, and also myself really want to make sure that we don't make stupid mistakes, not listening. That would be a that would be to miss a huge opportunity to be fair, with Penpot, and to make sure that everyone, when I say accessible to everyone, I don't know what people picture in their minds, but for me, I'm always thinking like Africa, like everyone should be able to have the best tools and then make use of them the way they need. But they cannot use them the way they need if we don't, they're not allowed in the conversation in the first place, right? Because then it's just they're getting something. And that's one of the reasons that is basically we now have the money. We have the Series A round. We can't spend money in that. We have to. It's like those are the resources that we need to say, okay, here's the money. Let's put a team working on this. It doesn't always have to be pro bono. We can support this uh, financially and get something in time because it's important to move fast, in generally speaking. So that's what I'm so excited to have this series A, is that we can do the things that people would expect us to do, like in this interview, like everything we mentioned, like or what, but also the things people are not expecting us to do, and are perhaps even more important in the long term. We're not doing this for 2023, Michal, or 2024. We're doing this to radically reshape the open source ecosystem around design for the next decade. That's so that has to go many different paths at the same time. And this one that we just covered is critical. It's and I would be personally be consider myself a failure if we don't address this the right way.
Yeah, I would call it, as I said, the next million designers, if we're talking the next billion users. So there's definitely a lot of people that can benefit from what we know, and then we can benefit from their collective perspective as well. So basically, it's like a two-way learning experience.
Yeah.
That basically what I really like the most about it is how design can basically make their lives significantly better. And of course, it does require hard work and a lot of motivation to learn this and to do it well. But still, a lot of people there do it, and just kind of getting that email, every other day from somebody on the other side of the world saying that, oh, I got the job, and well, it's all perfect, and it just makes my day every single day. So I'm very committed to that education to everybody, not to just the people who have enough dollars to afford my stuff. We are all part of the conversation now. We're all at the same table as equals and trying to build the future of design tools, of design as an industry, basically. So let's contribute together.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah, perfect. Perfectly said, Mihal.
All right.
It's all about innovation and owning that innovation, right? So we need to have everyone on board.
Okay, thank you for joining me on this call today. And I really am rooting for you guys. I'm going to be
Thank you.
pushing Penpot and some other tools this year as well, just as alternatives, because I believe people should have a choice. People should have the ability to learn design, especially in places where it's expensive or difficult.
Mm.
And that next million designers is basically waiting for that competition to ramp up, maybe to kind of give Adobe, a run for their money a little bit, so they can't start charging too much with all that competition, kind of creating new innovative things and maybe at some point even running around them in circles. So hopefully that will happen. Congratulations one more time on your recent funding. And yeah, I'll be keeping my fingers crossed for the benefit of the community and of the open source community as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mihal. This has been a pleasure. Really, really grateful for all your support in the distance, with your own ideas, your own interests, your own motivations for your own audience. But it has been a pleasure to see you how you've covered, what we do and be critical about it, and but also supportive. And I really enjoy this time with you.
Right.
And I hope to meet you again in the near future, perhaps when we launch this general availability Penpot, like in a
Well,
month or so.
definitely, I'll be looking at it very closely and doing my own review. And I already started doing some little design exercises in Penpot, kind of getting ready for next year, because obviously I'll have to switch. I'm not going to be using Adobe products. So just getting myself ready. I'll also be sharing some feedback with you guys
Yeah.
constantly. So yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. And yeah, see you next time.
See you next time.
If you managed to watch the entire video, thank you. Your engagement is really helping this channel grow. And if you have any extra questions to Penpot, please leave them in the comments down below the video. You can also find all the relevant links, including the links that you can use to give them feedback and feature requests, in the description below. So that's it from me for today, and as always, have a beautiful day.